This viewer asks, can you show us a precise way to put yellow, like cadmium yellow light, and blue, like ultramarine blue, side by side with necessary gradient, like in water reflecting a yellow building, but having no greenish overlap? Now there's a problem to solve. Well, there are actually two ways that we can solve this depending on what's going on. I've got two samples here. My goodness, when there are reflections in water, you can see all kinds of things going on. But I wanted to show you two examples of what you might expect, because really, in the long run, whenever we're trying to solve problems, if we go back to observation, that's our key. And so look what we can observe. Now she asked for gradient, a gradient, not how they intersect as ripples, but a gradient that moves from blue, like ultramarine blue, to yellow, like cadmium yellow light, without having them to mix and cause green in between. Yes, and there is a little trick that we can use, but I want you to look. Now we have a really fine gradient. I couldn't find a photograph that showed a yellow that's like cadmium yellow light against a blue that's like ultramarine blue. So I've got something here that can show you maybe an example, because you're going to see all kinds of colors reflecting in the water. And so once again, it's going to be the principle. How do you get from point A to point B? By using a guide, a principle to guide you, rather than by a formula. And so that's what we're going to do here. Now, here we can see we have a gradient. This is kind of a yellow moving to yellow-orange. And then you see it moves to that sort of greenish-blue water that we're accustomed to seeing in water. But you don't really see green. But what do you see if you look really, really close? You see a neutral. You see that nature has blended so that we see a neutralization between this warm color and this cooler color, between this kind of yellow-orange and this blue-green. Those two would, if you mix them together with paint, give you a green tint. So there's a nice gradient, and notice I said neutral, which is one solution. Now if we go down to this photograph and observe really, really closely, and it's really, the photograph will capture, this is one place where photograph will capture something that we can study more intently. If we're there in plein air, we can study it too, but really need to look closely for it. So if you look in between, you'll see that some of that same thing happening, like right in here. Look really, really close at this, and you'll see that there is a gradient. And you can see that it goes from here, it goes from this sort of orangey into a blue there, but we don't see the green. Well, and that is, if you look right in between there, you do see a neutral. But then you look on the other side. Now this is a yellow building reflecting in it. That's what I was searching for, a yellow building reflecting in water, or yellow reflecting in water. And this is sort of yellow reflecting. We see a little bit of yellow, but I want you to notice what's happening right between the yellow and the blue. You see a little bit of reddish, or it's actually more closer to a red-violet. So let's look at what, and that's the observation. So we made two observations of what the gradients are doing between two colors, warm and cool, opposite colors, sometimes yellow to blue-green. We've seen all kinds of possibilities there. But so once you make the observation, to know how to get it, a good way is to go to the color wheel and use a principle. And so here's the color wheel. Now let's use let's use the principle. I'll just put the color wheel right there. Let's put it a little bit closer to those gradients. So here, if we look at what's going on in our observation here, the yellow-orange, we see this as yellow-orange, and you see this as a kind of a greenish blue, which would be right here. Well, you see they are close to being complements. Yellow, orange, blue, violet is a real complement, but they're close to being complements. But so what we need to do there is to find a complement of one of them. And in this case, if we were going to do this, we could find the complement. We'd actually find the complement of yellow-orange, which would be blue-violet. We could mix a little bit of that blue-violet into the yellow-orange, and that should cause us to have that neutral gradient. In other words, we'll create a neutral of the same value. By the way, it would need to be the same value. You create a neutral of a set of complements. You could create the neutral of a set of complements of these two. So you can create a neutral of the set of complements and then sandwich the neutral in between the two colors. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. Now here we have what I was pointing out. We have the yellow moving through red or red-violet into the blue. You notice the blue is a little bit blue or gray there. And so in that case, what's happened is that we find a color that has something of both colors in it. Now, let me show you this part first, but I'm going to use those colors that she suggested. And remember that if you look at these, you'll see they move through pretty much the same value. If you squint right here, you'll see, even though the orange is very bright, they move pretty much through the same value. Here they move through from a very, very light to a very, very dark. So in this case, let me show you what you might do. So if we were using blue, ultramarine blue, which the viewer suggested, we could use ultramarine blue, and then she said cadmium yellow light. So this is close. This is Hansa yellow light. It's close to cadmium yellow light. Now, first thing I would need to do is to get this blue closer to this value. And white is the most logical thing, so I'll just pull white into that. And get that pretty close in value. It doesn't have to be exactly on the nose, but that's still too dark. So we'll get that pretty close in value by continuing to add white until we get it. Now, I want to also compare to what we have in the photograph, and so we see. Okay, we see we're in the pretty much the same value range there in the photograph. Now the next thing, in order to get the neutral, we need a complement. We could have a complement of yellow, or we could have a complement of blue. Now I'm going to choose a complement of yellow. Now cobalt violet, I'm going to put it. I think I'll just put it right over here to work with it. Cobalt violet is a very weak tinting strength, so it's a good color to experiment with. And cobalt violet is close to being a complement of cadmium yellow light. We could call it cobalt violet is a violet that registers pretty close to a violet on the color wheel. You can see it right here. You see right there. I'll put just a little bit of white in that so that you can see a little bit better. You see right here, it's very, very close to the registration of the violet here, which is the complement of yellow there. Now, what we can do to begin with is to take some of this yellow and create with its complement a value that's the same value as yellow, or similar value, in the similar value range as yellow, which I will do right here. It's always, whenever you're mixing complements, it's always a good idea to value, I call it value correct. Value correct first. Be sure that you are dealing with two hues of a similar value, or else you're going to get some conflicting stuff happen, because the value is going to change along with everything else you're doing. This is close. It's not exact, but it's close. Now watch this. If I pull into that color enough of this, it's going to be close to neutral. As long as it doesn't turn green, I'm good. So that's very, very close to neutral right in there. I'll get it just a little bit more. The yellow is a little bit stronger in tinting strength than the cobalt violet, so I'll keep working it right there. Now, to get the gradient between the ultramarine blue, I'm going to do this with a palette knife. You can do it with a brush, but it's easier to show you with a palette knife. To get the gradient between the ultramarine blue, which I will pick up from right here, this is the value corrected ultramarine blue, remember. Let's get enough of that to show you. Alright, so I'm going to just use it with a palette knife here, and I'm going to create a relatively smooth application here on the sheet of canvas. This is smooth there. The water in here is not moving very much, and so it's a smooth transition. Now I'll pick up the neutral. Be sure I don't have too much yellow in that. Okay, I'll pick up the neutral. That it does seem I did pick up too much yellow, so I've got to watch that. Add just a little bit more white in there. It's one of these scientific studies where you adjust as you go, which is when you're doing a scientific experiment, that's what you do. You adjust as you go. All right, let's see now if that doesn't, if that's not better. There we go, right there. Now, that's probably, I spread that out a little bit much, but now I can blend those together. And see, you can see, now if it starts to turn green, that tells me I need more. I've got too much of the yellow in it. And so that's when I make another adjustment. And that's what she wants to avoid. This person, maybe she, he, I don't remember. Not that it matters. We want to avoid that. We want to avoid that going green on us. So we will lean it a little bit more towards the violet, and get that out. There we go, right there. And then you blend. Now you can see that will go from blue to neutral, and then it still wants to lean a little bit more towards green. I've not got enough paint there. Let's go back to the ultramarine blue again. There we go. Here we go. Now we got it. Now we get that blended. Just put the palette knife between them and blend them together, and we can see blue going through neutral, and then we can add the yellow over here and have the yellow. Now this is a broad, very broad gradient. If you were actually doing that for this sort of thing, you would want a more narrow gradient. So let's just bring this down right here like that and show you that blend. Okay, now you can see that pretty much have the blue moving through the neutral towards the yellow. So that's one way to do that. Now the other of what we're seeing right here, let's just put the yellow on first here, like this. Now you will often see, but you don't always see, but you will often see in a reflection, when there's a reflection of a primary color, you will often see in the primary color, then there is the sky reflecting next to that primary color. You will often see a little orange or violet streak in between them. So in that case, what we'll do is we'll go for, I would get some alizarin crimson here, and let's make a red violet. Now once again, we need to value correct. So let's get that alizarin a little bit closer, and let's just get that ultramarine blue. We can see that blue is a little bit darker there. So let's get some red violet. Okay, that's, now I'm going, what I want there is a color that has both colors in it. So red violet has blue in it, red violet has yellow, well, red violet has blue in it. When we add the yellow, we'll have something like this, where we have a kind of a red violet going to kind of an orange, more towards a red orange, red violet to red orange. Now let's see how that works here. The red violet. Well, I don't have enough. Sometimes I do have that tendency when I'm showing you a demonstration to just don't mix enough paint. I'm going to just quickly revisit that. And what I want is a red violet that's pretty much, there we go, right there. Now let's try it. Put the red violet right here. There we go, that's better. Now, you see what happens when I mix that red violet with the orange, with the edge of the orange. See right there, it blends in with the orange without causing without thing unnatural, and then we can go from there towards the blue. So let's get the blue. I'll put it right here. Different blue. Let's come up here for more. And let's do a little value correction of that blue. I want to get it, I've got it a little bit lighter than we have it there. Let's just go ahead and get it a little bit darker. Okay, that's closer. Now you see I can put the blue right over the red violet like this and just squeeze in on it and get right next to it. So we have just a little bit. Let's get that blended. There we go. There's your gradient right there. There's your gradient. Now, right at the bottom there, we saw a little green. We see how now we have the yellow actually moving towards the blue without having that greenish in between. So you can do little experiments like that where, and if you do the experiment with the palette knife first, the palette knife will give you more control. So you do the experiment and then try it with a brush, where maybe start with a photograph of something that's a reflection so that you have a little bit of a guide there. So one way is to take a neutral, have a neutral mixed of a complement of one of the colors, and sandwich the neutral between the two primaries. Another way is to choose a color that is compatible with both. You might say has red violet. We know that red is compatible with yellow, turning it into an orange. So those two work well together. And then the violet is next to blue, so it sandwiches well between yellow and blue. So have fun with that one. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.